So my name is Ian Ginn. I'm the host of Digitel Talk. As media partners at this year's FYUZ, I thought it would be a good idea to do a wrap-up with industry leaders. I'm delighted to have some guests with me. I'll start in no particular order, though, with Stéphane Téral. Stéphane Téral is the telecoms expert and speaker based in San Francisco, known for his involvement in Open RAN, 5G technology, and industry events such as 5G Summit and Telecom Infra Project. Vishal Mathur. Vishal is a telecoms executive, currently head of global engagement for the Telecom Infra Project, with over 25 years of leadership experience across telecoms, digital infrastructure, AI, and cloud sectors. And last but certainly not least, we have Geoff Hollingworth, who is Chief Marketing Officer at Rakuten Symphony, recognized for his 30 years career leading innovation, marketing, and strategic across the telecoms cloud industries. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Ian.
Yep, thank you very much.
So the first thing I thought would be good to do is introduce it briefly before handing over to Vish, because as you could hear from the introduction of Vish actually is heavily involved than I am in the whole FYUZ. Would I be right in saying that FYUZ comes from the word fusion in that sense? I don't know. I was looking it up. I asked actually a chat TP. So I said, does FYUZ mean fuse? And it said, basically, it did come up with the event, by the way, in the spelling that we have it as well. Anyway, the main themes of the event are open disaggregated networks, AI-driven infrastructure, cloud-native architectures, automation, intelligence operations, and pathways towards 6G, which are all central to the event. A mixture of attendees, but industrial leaders. And I think, having been to the event a few times, I'd say the people are there are not lost. They're there for a reason, not lost souls, which you sometimes get at events, and everyone who's passionate about the cause. And anyway, so those are the main things about it. So I think we wanted to open up and, as I say, over to Vish to explain a bit sort of where we've also come from with this event and where it's going and what was the sort of whole purpose of the event.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ian. Thanks for the intro. I'll come back to why the word FYUZ, FYUZ, in a second. Let me just start with TIP. For those who don't know who Telecom Infra Project is, we're a global trade association, been around for 8 years. Originally was started with a very strong intent from Facebook and a number of operators to try and drive a level of advanced connectivity in hard-to-reach areas, but also in sort of urban areas. It's now morphed into and evolved into an independent association. Has about 120 members, large and small companies across the telecoms value chain, and board members that span across different tier one operators, hyperscalers, vendors, etc. Its mission is, as you quite rightly said, about open and disaggregation. But actually, I would say if I was trying to sort of strapline what we're trying to do as a community, it's really to try and drive a transformation in the way networks are currently towards being open, autonomous, programmable, AI-driven, and intent-based networks. I mean, that all takes a long time and lots of great sort of buzzwords there. But in effect, we do wish to allow for telecom operators who are the primary custodians of these networks, as well as other service providers, to be able to actually offer advanced connectivity where it's needed for whatever types of devices or consumer experiences that will exist now and in the future, but also potentially to try and monetize or, leverage the assets in the future. So FYUZ, if I come to FYUZ now, 5th year running, TIP is not an events company, but we do use FYUZ as an annual opportunity for the community and other non-members to come to the event. And I guess as an event, it's not about quantity of people. I mean, we certainly don't try and suggest that we're trying to compete against the other platforms out there. But we certainly want to ensure that there's a level of quality in terms of speakers, attendance, content. And therefore, this year's FYUZ, I would say actually, when I look at the numbers, surprisingly was more than last year, though a lot of the coverage is saying that it was smaller or it seemed to be more subdued. Actually, I'd say it's probably just the way we set it up this year. It just seemed to be less people around. But actually, on number wise, it was just a little bit more than last year. But actually, a lot of the coverage that we've seen, and even the board members are expressing that it was outstanding for its content and its engagement across the community, from demand to supply side and academia. Let me stop there and see if you want to add any other reflections on that.
Yeah, well, I think from my side, as you say, it's difficult to know exact numbers, but I'll pass over to Geoff. What's your sort of initial take of the event as well and its purpose?
Yeah, no, thanks, Ian. And by the way, I've just realised I've been mispronouncing your name since time began. I always pronounce the Ian gin after my favourite drink.
Most drinkers do that, you know.
Most people with a problem mispronounce your name because that's all we can see. First ever tip, which might surprise people, that my first ever tip and the first time we've actually joined, first ever FYUZ and the first time we've ever joined tip. So I was very excited to be there and experience firsthand. And a lot of the rumors that I'd heard, I felt were true. I have no concept of number of people or size. To quote something, I mean, size isn't actually important. It's having the right people and the right conversations. It felt like a very good networking session where the people that did attend, as you said, Ian, they knew why they were there, and we joined because there were real progress in the work streams that we wanted to be involved with, that then it was accelerating to commercial outcomes. So I think all of that was true. A very good 3 days of having access to people who were actually doing these activities around openness and disaggregation, reinventing of the network, a very open sharing of experience with that. So it was great.
Yeah, let me add to that. If everyone's asking numbers, so we had around just over 1,000 registered and 650 attended on the first day, 800 or so on the day 2, which was surprising to us as well. And then even day 3, which was half a day, we had 500 odd people. But if you saw the time I saw everyone was either in the morning or actually in the evening and the happy hours. And generally, both times were full. So that's great. It just felt like, as an event, to Geoff's point and your point, Ian, it was people that knew they had to be there and they wanted to be there to talk about and build relationships on those particular topics that we're talking about. And
Stéphane, what about you? What did you think about the event and its mission, let's say?
Well, I mean, it's spot on, right on track, since the beginning. It's a very focused event with a lot of technology involved, from every domain, across all domains of the network. So it was really nice to, as Geoff and Vish said, the quality of the people who attended the event. And I'd like to, in fact, mention that we had lots of C-level people that took the time to actually come here, as opposed to other events, because October all the way through mid-November is packed with events. And you had these people who came a long way to actually meet other people, exchange insights and ideas about where they are, when it comes to network disaggregation. And in fact, TIP has been accomplishing many of its objectives. And, one of them is the amount of sharing that you can see, at TIP, whether it is on plenary sessions and panels or breakout sessions or, behind closed doors in other meetings. And I've done many of that last week. And everyone is saying, TIP has already changed something in industry. And that is info sharing. Together we stand. And that's how we make progress from everywhere in the world. So when you have, C-level people coming from Orange, AT&T, TELUS, NTT, Docomo, I mean, Rakuten. This is just, Deutsche Telekom. I mean, it's amazing that, TIP manages to bring these people, together in Dublin. So, I say bravo.
Top level, as you say, it wasn't just from those companies, it's CTO level and above, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Good, very, 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 very worthy comments.
Today's episode is sponsored by IFG Consulting Europe, who help operators to tap into technologies to accelerate digitization of the network, drive revenues, and reduce costs by championing promising software providers in telecoms, enterprise, and mobile markets. Go to ifgconsultingeurope.com to find out more.
One thing I'd like to explore, because I've been to the event twice, and I would say, if I may, I'm sometimes a bit confused. And let me explain why. It comes from the Telecom Info Project, stands for project. But then we have the certification capability as well. We're not not standards driven, right? Those are the sort of three bits of it. If you could just sort of, Vish, I'm pointing here at this, or asking you to maybe comment on that. Bring those three things together is, how does this, and coming back to the sharing bit that Stéphane was saying, how is this sort of put together? How does this sort of work?
Let me explain it in a fairly simple way. TIP is not a SDO. We're not a standards organization. We are there to facilitate solutioning. And the way solutioning is being built out is that, the whole ideology is meant to be multi-vendor and interoperable, etc. The integration efforts, the testing efforts take time, and the solutioning takes maturing. As you can tell, that transforming and transitioning networks to becoming something quite visionary will take time, as Geoff is pointing out as well. What we put in place is not necessarily the idea of certification, but just the idea of placement of product in terms of readiness for deployability. And so we've got a notion of badging, and that's where it confuses people. So, like O-RAN Alliance has badging as well. But I think where O-RAN Alliance is an SDO, and their badging is determined by compliance against standards. Ours is more around conformance to test results, to test plans. And those test plans are curated by a common agenda from operators. They'll say there's a particular set of use cases that we want to see deployed. Here's the features and the functionality that we need. And actually, in terms of test criteria, here are the non-functional test criteria that we need to see to ensure that there's a level of performance and parity to what we have already in our brownfield networks, for example. So our badging is meant to be determined by that. So bronze means I meet the requirements. Silver means I have a solution that might be built with others that actually has been tested in a controlled environment, like a lab, and therefore generally fits the bill, maybe against simulated data sets, etc. And gold is actually, it's been deployed in a pre-production or production network. So therefore holds a sort of a level of standard that maybe there's replicability for other operators. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it answers my question and actually makes it a lot clearer. Thank you very much for that. Geoff, do you want to comment? Because you're actually a vendor, let's say, in that sense, aren't you? So.
Yeah, it's so let's just get down to basics. I like this conversation. The world doesn't need any more standards. We've got more standards than people in the industry almost. What the world needs is deployed capability that makes a difference. Standards are supposed to be something that follows success to industrialize and take friction out. I think we're confused if we think standards are the answer and then we're trying to understand how to do them. The reason we like TIP is because they aren't a standards organization. They leverage what has been standardized in the hope it removes friction. And then they can go back and give real world advice to those bodies that are working on those standards. But the goal here is not to have more standards. Standards are a cost if they're not actually taking friction out of deployed capability. So it tips over. I think we're in a bit of a inflection point in the industry where some of the things that we held true and religious previously are actually starting to become burdens and curses to us commercially as we try and release more energy. And I feel that TIP is a home where there's an honest conversation at the heart of their identity that says we have to roll things out that make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, if I may add to this, Ian, and this is to Stéphane's point as well, FYUZ is a point in time where there is sharing of insight and sharing of thoughts from demand side actors and from supply side. The true artifact that we want as TIP to be able to create a whole portfolio of are deployed solutions. What are the actual blueprints to those deployed solutions? For what deployment scenario? What was the technical requirement? What were the test requirements? What were the results from that? That in itself is insight for the industry. That's our core bread and butter as TIP. The more we can generate through our community, the more value there will be to those who are not members, who are straining at the edges of trying to think what are their strategies going forward. Everyone is thinking about openness, let's be honest, but they don't know how. Because 5G architectures, let's be honest, standards are quite complex to implement. And there are too many variations for vendors to actually implement and for telcos to consume. So we need to have some reduction of friction in this process. Let's show what there is in terms of availability.
Stéphane, did you want to add to that, or are you fully aligned with what was just being said?
Yeah, I'm fully aligned. Again, this was all about sharing, and everybody's happy because the people I talked to after the event, are on the moon because it's mission accomplished for them. They went there because they had a good reason to make the trip. And again, you had people coming from various parts of the world. You made the trip, up there. You better have a good reason, to make that trip. And yes, they were after something, and they were very satisfied because they got it.
So may I ask the question, because as you say, it's community and you've got pull and push, I guess, if you like. Often these associations, and again, I don't know the ins and outs here, that's why I'm asking the question, is that time is in essence, it's sometimes really difficult to get the operators actually in particular to take the time to make themselves available to share. Because at the end of the day, as you say, you're asking them, what do you want? But actually them actually being able to take the time to actually spend time sharing with the vendors is challenging. Is that, something that could be improved here, would you say?
For sure. Definitely. Go on, Geoff.
Yeah, let's give a real world example actually that just travels over the conversation that we've been having. At the FYUZ event, TIP launched a video quality of experience working stream. So the truth in our industry is that 70% of everything we carry is video. We have not effectively worked with any of the content providers to understand how we do that the best way. It would be like Amazon delivering packages, but not speaking to any of their delivery people and hoping it worked. And when it didn't work, they just tried some other ways to deliver the packages. So there's no shortage of standards, by the way, for quality of experience with video. You open a door and there's another one. The challenge is there's been no sharing, to Stéphane's point, no collaboration, no common understanding of what quality really means. But both of those participants from an operator and from a content side have the same goal. They want to deliver really effective quality of experience to the end user, so they stay. I find it astonishing that hasn't happened previously. But when I speak to the operators, ourselves in Rakuten included, and I mention this, number one problem, this is real capital expense where they are overbuilding their networks to supply something because they can't optimize it. And then you start looking at money of 10% increased CapEx, 30%. It translates into something that absolutely gets the attention of the operators. So the only challenge that we are placing into the TIP community is how quickly can we get something actually into the field, learnings proven, and then scale it across everybody. Because that, I mean, we're talking like literally hundreds of millions to billions of dollars of play here in the industry.
Wow, that's thank you for making it so real, if you like, as a good example. But taking that as you say, it's a new work stream. Vish, maybe you could just highlight what are the main work streams and groups.
For sure. Let me follow on from Geoff because that's top of mind. So this QoE video management is the latest project group that is set up. And it will we're already now in recruitment phase of building up a good constituent set of operators and content application providers. So right now we have AT&T, Telefonica, Orange, Vodafone, probably a couple of others that I can't remember on one side. And the other side, we have YouTube, Snap, Meta, TikTok. So great providers of video content and network provision. 75% of the downlink traffic is feeds and live streaming. So to Geoff's point, there is a very clear remit and charter for these particular companies to come in and saying, let's take what is being defined in standards like ITU-T and IETF and actually try and build some best practice around end-to-end solutioning and build up a sort of a set of KPIs that can be shared as best practice. And of course, start to look at some guidance that can be shared on top of that for other content application providers and CSPs. And I think we'll find this particular one starting to grow as a community. There'll be other application providers, operators, integrators as well, because you're going to need integration in all of this implementation as well, et cetera, et cetera. The other groups that I'll just summarize very quickly, other than Open RAN, which is probably the longest one around and has its own sort of particular remit, particularly around RAN intelligence and automation. There is Open Optical Packet Transport, which is, as a community, has been the most thriving, smallest but thriving, and actually delivering the most. I can talk about that separately. Open LAN, which is maybe comprised of mostly mid-scale to small Wi-Fi providers, basically, and vendors and ODMs who are basically developing enterprise-grade open Wi-Fi and LAN switching solutions, which are now in the market. 400,000 APs deployed, 80 plus SKUs of access points. There's a neutral host infra sharing project group, quite a small community, mostly of neutral host brokers, telcos, vendors, who are effectively stating a mission that on wireless and on fixed, there is an opportunity to address chronic coverage and connectivity issues, indoor, outdoor, and actually now if you take into data center as well. And then I'd say there's a last group, which is Telco AI, which started off with Orange, Deutsche Telekom, NVIDIA, and Intel, has been trying to be use case focused around AI use cases and development of reference architectures. We may find you may have heard at FYUZ, there was conversations around data and AI foundations and looking at, there's a birds of feather and there's a main stage event. We're trying to work out in TIP what we should be doing around data or an industry framework towards exposure of network data in a safe and responsible way for the opportunity to develop agentic, frameworks, learning models, and actually accelerate application developments going forward. So that's just in a nutshell what we've got in TIP in terms of portfolio. And I would say coming out of FYUZ in terms of coverage, a lot of the coverage tended to be around Open RAN, but now to Stéphane's point, there's just a much broader set of interest across other tech domains, which is good. Good to hear.
And these are all just driven by the membership. Fundamentally, it's really a membership driven.
Yeah. It's purposely why FYUZ is there. It's not TIP talking about this stuff. It's about our members. So yeah, absolutely.
So if one of the other areas I think we wanted to sort of delve into is highlights of the event. Any particular standout moments that people have? Anyone in particular wanted to, other than Vish, you're moderating and hosting the main stage, which you do very well, as I say, you're a real professional at that. Anyone to add to that? Stéphane, maybe?
In fact, the highlight is the fact that Open Run is real, delivers, performs. Because, since now a few years ago, when, and particularly when Rakuten Mobile launched the network, it was in the pandemic. So when we came back from the pandemic, it was still Rakuten talking about it. NT Docomo, for some reason, didn't talk that much, but they started at the same time as Rakuten Mobile, actually in 2019. NT Docomo asked its 4 vendors, 4G vendors and 5G vendors to open up the phone hole. That's how they started in the brownfield, but they didn't brag about it. But now this time around, so last year, we witnessed that things were moving into the right direction. But this year, actually, what a difference 1 year has made. Because this year we talked about achievement, in the field. So you had AT&T sharing its progress, and as well as TELUS in Canada, that is replacing Huawei with Open Run supplied by Samsung, but also radio units from BMI. And then you had Deutsche Telekom saying, hey, look, things are doing well. And by the way, I have an RFQ for 30,000 sites. Wow. What else? Vodafone, announced its vendors for Project Spring 6. So basically, the bottom line is, come on, everyone, as you can see, this is real. Now it's no longer a greenfield operator that is running the show. It's real tier 1 CSPs that are doing the tough job of introducing this open, disaggregated architecture in their existing footprint. It's a very different task than just, go straight and deploy a greenfield network. So for me, that was the confirmation. And in fact, for some other people as well, going there, okay, we heard AT&T doing a lot of talking last year. Where are they? And yeah, they are. The things are up and running. 60% of the traffic is already. So actually, what it is, 30% of the traffic is already on the network, and will reach 70% by the end of next year. So, we talked about security, we talked about everything related to Open Run, and everybody said, at each session, whether it was main stage or breakout session, that, things are working fine and delivering, and sometimes exceeds the performance of a traditional run. So it's all good news. And, this is one highlight, right? But there are many other things that happen at FYUZ.
Okay, well, you can come back. We'll maybe come back to a minute on that. I see Geoff wanted to come in on that.
Well, I'll give an example of something that was a bit of a surprise to me. I was invited to a readout of companies by Digital Catapult, and Digital Catapult is the technical accelerator funded by the UK government to help develop and support new technology companies underneath the Sonic initiative. So they had a cohort of companies focusing on private deployments, cellular deployments. I found it astonishing the traction that they're starting to get, and there were 2 drivers that they had successfully delivered on because of the open interfaces, Open RAN, and the other domain interfaces. The first one was that they were now delivering cellular systems with the same operational simplicity as Wi-Fi. And the second one was that the price points were similar to Wi-Fi. Now, when you start to have technology that can come down in a market and deliver towards a different type of customer, both in what they can afford and in their sophistication, you unlock a market. The most successful wireless technology is Wi-Fi. The reason is because it's simple and it's cheap. If cellular can come down to that level and have the performance and the deployments, it's a whole world opens up. So I was completely amazed. I had no idea that there was an undercurrent of results coming out from these initiatives like Digital Catapult now. I agree with Stéphane. I think it's very easy to sit in the bleachers and have a beer and say, nothing's happening, nothing's going on. There's a lot of people doing a lot of hard work who will reap the rewards in the next 5 years, 10 years.
It's true. I mean, I think you're right, and I think, I don't know if you noticed in the press in the last few days, I know because we're recording afterwards, but 1&1 have completed their migration, so they now are saying that they're fully ORAN compliant, which is in the largest European country and one of the main operators. I mean, I've talked to lots of people who've been very disparaging about it. You can imagine German engineering think, which is, it will not work. But it is working as such, and I believe your company might be involved in that. I'm not sure about that, Geoff. Is that essentially?
Yeah. So they had a very, very great business model. They wanted to move from being an MVNO to an MNO. It changes completely their economic of serving customers. I think in that article at the peak, it was saying there were 50,000 transfers a day from MVNO to the MNO. And they've completed it on time, which met the German regulators' requirement that they did that before the end of the year for the licensing. Today, we're filming this on a Thursday, November the 13th. Rakuten's just come out with its quarterly earnings. Fantastic. Continuing to improve, continuing to grow. I think the lesson that I'd highlight to people is you get rewarded for doing a lot of hard work, where no one just gives you something. But when you start to understand what you can do yourself and start to deliver on those results, the only direction is that you improve. And I think we're on a journey for that in Rakuten and other companies.
Vish, anything highlights that you have from the event when you were not on stage?
I'll keep it specific and tight. There are two that I wanted to pick out. One was, they're both on main stage, but there were follow-through sessions as well on this. One is there was an operator panel with AWS, which basically was talking about how do we start to embrace AI and look to try and unlock the opportunities that we have within our network data. Now, I know, personally speaking, AWS has a particular view on how to do this and orchestrate this, but it's not the only view. There needs to be an industry framing of how to address the problems here. But what I liked about the session, and it had, I think, Gaetano from Telefonica, Laurent Deboucher, and from Orange, and a few others, TELUS, I think, Bernard and Rob Sony from AT&T. That what they came to a realization was that, you know what, the RAN area is the most important. I mean, that is obviously the most capex intensive and there's most return on investment if we can really truly unlock automation and much more clearer paths to really agentifying the RAN space, for want of a better word. But what the realization, the commonality was that let's walk, jog, run in this approach, because what we're doing is reframing the way a telco operator thinks about how do we address this problem. And they said, let's start with small, and a discrete area might be in the optical IP transport space, which has already started to really move and transform. There is already disaggregation happening at the hardware layer. There's a software-defined architecture that's now, being absorbed and consumed by telcos around the world to open up APIs. And therefore, a Gen AI and AI mindset is already now being spurred within the ecosystem and leveraging data. So therefore, building in cloud and AI compute capabilities into that is possible. Therefore, technically provable. So let's get it going. So that's one sort of lovely moment in time. And I'll tell you in tip, this is a sort of a pathway that we're now taking forward into 2026. And we'll build a community interest around this space. Not forgetting that brand needs to be covered as well. The other area which I really enjoyed was on day 3. And day 3 is a quieter day, of course, but the main stage sessions were really insightful, particularly the one around non-terrestrial integration with terrestrial. I loved listening to Link Mobile and Vodafone and Telefonica, and basically what I picked up from it is SpaceX has come in and basically is monopolizing the non-terrestrial space, but it's changed the economic model for launch of constellations. So that's now come down. Therefore, there is now a possibility to push out constellations into the market. And of course, you have a few like Falcon 9 and Starship and Ariane coming through. The second thing is Vodafone, and Paco was on stage. He basically said, we've been investing in Open RAN for a long time, and we've learnt on how to get the payload right, or learnt about putting, a RAN payload onto the LEO and having an integration back into baseband, DUC, which is great. And third was a resonance across the NTN and terrestrial communities that, you know what, we need to manage expectations here. There is a formulaic proposition that comes to the table now when NTN and terrestrial now come together. And therefore, let's be very clear that what non-terrestrial brings to the table is integratable, but also is a complement to what already exists in terrestrial from a spectrum management perspective, from a use case and proposition perspective, and therefore from, a performance perspective. I think that was great. It just shows that this market is now bubbling, and I would predict 2026, we're going to see more bilateral arrangements coming, but also potentially more fierce competition and therefore innovation in this space as well.
And Stéphane, do you have something else? You said you have lots of other topics and nuggets that you wanted to share.
Yeah, in fact, Vish touched upon that. One is AI, the importance of AI. However, AI is not new in telecoms, and I'd like to thank, big thanks to Rob Sonny to remind everyone in the audience that, whoa, come on, boys and girls, there is nothing new here. AI has been used for a long time. And in my particular situation, as you know, Ian, I've been tracking, analyzing the sun market since its debut in 2010, release 8 3GPP. It's in 2015 that the first machine learning algorithms were blended with sun algorithms. And that was the beginning, actually, of the whole story of where we are right now with RAPs, non-real-time rate RAPs. This is coming from centralized sun use cases. Then, if we look at AI, the big issue is how you train models. And this was also, discussed in the plenary session, actually, where we had AWS and Meta, along with AT&T and TELUS, because basically the service providers control, that data. So at this point, you can achieve 70% accuracy by using a run simulator. The 30% left is still controlled by the service provider. So the question, and it was an interesting debate, what needs to be done to access, the remaining 30% of proprietary data, because no service provider on the planet wants to provide that data. And that leaves all the ecosystem, the vendor ecosystem, working on apps in the dark. So something's going to happen So in fact, there was a discussion of, okay, let's build a network foundational model. Let's start with them. With that, let's see how we can share bit by bit. Is this gonna happen? I don't know, but I found this discussion very interesting because, again, everybody is using AI at this point. It's not new in telecom. If you want AI to work properly, performs and deliver, valid outcomes, you'd better have the right data. The problem is, some of that right data is under control. So we're not going to go to the next step. Are we? Geoff, what do you think? Because you are from both sides, the operator and the vendor. At least you are in a very good position because you can actually train everything on your own data.
Yeah, data is everything. And the management of data, exposure and governance of data, there isn't anything unless we understand what you were discussing, Stéphane. I think the question and debate that Vishal brought up is, at the moment, every single operator network is unique. We have a different blend of vendors, node releases, node versions. When Rakuten Mobile first constructed its network, it constructed an abstraction of a unified data model across all vendors, according to the Rakuten Mobile vendor landscape and node modeling. When we engage with other operators, we see that there's a continuous 30%, 50%, it's getting smaller of adapters that need to get added to create that exposure. I think the question is whether we can optimize that on the industry and it makes sense. There's a question on whether AI can help us solve that problem without the need to actually coordinate across all operator networks. My only message to all operators in the industry is that data is your data. It's not the vendor's data. And you have to make sure that data is consistent in your operation rather than worrying about it being consistent over the total industry. It's much more important to have operational integrity inside yourself than any standard outside. I think that's a bit comes back to my confusion about why we think standards are an answer versus something that's supposed to follow an answer. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, Stéphane. But I find it interesting that we're all jumping down this AI route, and I think there were some conversations and awareness that said, actually, that's going to be as good as the data.
Which brings me, you've triggered a few thoughts on my side. One is, and I don't know if it was this conference, but in a recent conference, as you just said, Geoff, when you talk about AI, what am I applying the AI across, right? For example, communications, today's world, if you talk about long distance communication, it's going to be across 3 networks. So that user experience is being optimized by whom and what level in that chain. So one question mark, I'm not answering it. You maybe guys have thoughts about that. And the other thing is, coming back to Stéphane's point, because I actually work with a company, which I can mention, Brown IPOS, who do RAN optimization. And they're in the weeds. And, they say, you can only really apply AI at the point of which, of course, you have the data. Back to what Geoff said, correlation of data, which is often from multiple points. So that then leads to, how real time it can be as well. And the other thing, of course, AI is by definition artificial intelligence. And one of the colleagues at the event, and I'll just try and find his name here, which I thought was, he made a brilliant comment. Locke is his name? Locke? He was a speaker. Simon Locke was talking about, I believe in deterministic. I don't believe in this AI rubbish. In the sense of, it is true because you need a deterministic way of provisioning the network. AI is good at collecting data and making a decision, maybe, but it's not actually good at deterministic because you get different outcomes. So those are just some comments about the AI thing. And last one, if I may, on that is that I do wonder that the whole project, particularly the ORAN project, has morphed. And what I mean is we know originally it was about vendors, or let's say the operators getting better value from vendors was the initial idea by disaggregating. But I wonder, even though AI has existed for a long time, opening it up and creating this API ecosystem, is that not allowing us to do, let's essentially take more control of the network at different layers? Question mark. I don't know if someone wants to comment on that, where they feel that we've actually come to a different place than where we wanted to started from, with giving the value as to what the whole thing has achieved.
Yeah, let me comment on that and then pass it over to Stéphane and Vishal. I think our industry has a habit of looking for an answer in a noun that is the ultimate answer. So it was NFV, it was cloud, it was the metaverse, is now AI. None of those things are true. The fundamental reason that we went down the path that we went down in Rakuten is that we needed everything to be programmable, because we knew if everything was programmable, we could actually orchestrate it into our operational model in a consistent way. And if things are more similar across each other, it's less cost, less friction to write the shims that translate everything. But openness as an end result is not important. It's what you want to do with the effects of having that programmability. I agree with you. I mean, I have a blog in the back of my head that I haven't got round to, but I wonder, Ian, to your point, is whether AI can replace standards. Now, we're already doing this in TM Forum compliance. So I think, Vishal, you mentioned the challenge with standards is 80% of it is optional settings inside the actual standard. We actually do automated conformance testing and compliance towards different vendor equipment, so that we can. That's much faster than trying to coordinate everyone to be on the same page when they're never on the same page, because people choose to implement different parts of the standard by design to protect a market sometimes. I think if there's a great question, I'd love to have a whole conference on it, is can we replace standards and at what level with now this much more advanced technology?
Well, I'm sure there's a work stream you can organise next year with Vish on that, if you want to run it, and get an audience that way. Yeah, great. Guys, do you want to add to what Geoff was saying? Vish, do you want to?
Yeah, let me step in a little bit. Back to Simon Locke. I loved his sort of provocative approaches, and he provokes in the industry, and he's got a very clear pathway when it comes to setting apart evolution of Wi-Fi, how it's actually implemented and how it's actually contextually used. So the deterministic approach that he's got and creating an architecture around that, showing how it can contextually be very relevant for the application and the use case is great. It's a great way of showing value. And I love coming to Geoff's point, programmability is a great word. Should be a buzzword that we should be trying to arch towards. Openness is a movement towards that. Openness gives you choice, really, but the choice inherently becomes difficult to implement because of the fact that, as Geoff said, everyone will implement standards in a different way. Architectures end up being complex. And actually, when you see a Rob Sony coming on stage and saying, yeah, I've managed to show that, my Ericsson stack works with 1Infinity radios. That's great. And therefore I can run voice on it. Shows that he's created a bit of choice for AT&T. Where there's a manifestation now seems to be more around the northbound interfaces, the automation, and therefore the telco control point around orchestrating and managing the orchestration of their networks. I think that is creating a new market space, a new opportunity for those who want to come into that space. It's great because it's the evolution of your traditional proprietary network to more AI-based and therefore automated network, which is a stepping stone. It's an evolution. In all due respect, it will uncover APIs. There will be a sort of a manifestation of open network APIs because actually you start to box up particular network functions using agentic AI, A2A or whatever it might be, or MCPs, and you'll be able to expose them as APIs. It would just make more efficiency and effectiveness in creating new applications that are necessary in the market. Forget about the buzzwords. I think the industry is evolving. It's naturally evolving because it needs to evolve. It needs to transform to what, Geoff and the Rakuten team have created, that programmability, because it's easier to plug in new choice vendors or new approaches in building and designing a future-proof network.
Do you have an idea why the operators are reluctant to give specifics about the efficiencies they're achieving? Because I remember that was mentioned at least twice on stage where people were asking the question, can you give us specifics as to, you say ORAN or whatever is achieving better efficiencies. But any idea why? Because I think, at the end of the day, other people believe as if they have data. When we talk about data, this is like performance data. This is like real data. Just wondered if you guys have an idea as to why it's not shared.
Well, I just think that they got caught off guard, and did not remember exactly what kind of metrics, for the performance they achieved. Because if you talk to their teammates, because we had, very senior executives talking about their network, because if you talk to their team, they'll tell you, when it comes to energy savings, we have achieved that. Spectral efficiencies, same thing. These are the two actually the most common parameters that I'm hearing about when it comes to telecom operators running Open RAN in their network. But even without Open RAN, energy savings is a big deal, particularly in Europe, but not limited to Europe, and spectral efficiencies as well, because you need to get as much bit per second per hertz as possible out of your spectrum. That way you postpone the need to deploy new spectrum. So this is a very important parameter to look at, and you have tools for that. Whether it is SON or software, separate software like Cohere Technologies, for example, or others. In fact, at FYUZ, you have other people doing like DeepSig, as a matter of fact, for spectral efficiencies. So, and they too can provide real data. So I think it's just, great question, but I don't remember what to answer actually, because they have so many data, particularly Vodafone has tons of data.
Yeah, well, it'd be good if that somehow that could be released anonymously, if nothing else, because I think at the end of the day that will maybe, even though we've got a lot of operators engaged, there are also a plethora of operators not going down this route. The more the better, I guess. At the end of the day, we're all interested in the industry moving towards.
Ian, let me ask you one question here, though. It's good. Any given CTO of an operator would be aware of their general KPIs, and by implementing these, innovative approaches to drive more programmability and automated management of your network. Let's be honest. The innovation cycle has shortened massively with the advent of these new tech. It's not in the G's. It's now here and now. So I guess the question becomes, isn't it very specific to that particular network and the context of that network of seeing what the incremental benefits are for a given CTO? if we were looking at this as an industry, then it would be amazing if we can actually start to create some level of benchmarking or balanced scorecard. Maybe Stéphane might want to see that as an approach. But that would be very useful, as opposed to, asking, I don't know, Bernard Bureau from TELUS, how much did you actually generate in terms of benefit from driving a level of anomaly detection in real time, sort of, cause analysis on your network? Have you actually generated benefit? Or energy saving? It depends how you're applying energy saving. Is it sell on, sell off? Is it more massive MIMO based energy saving techniques? It really depends on the context. So this is what TIP would love to do, is generate as much of that insight, and eventually we'll probably be able to find some sort of ways to actually compare and contrast.
But in the NGMN session, they actually shared KPIs. Laurent Le Boucher, in particular, he kicked off the session and he threw lots of statistics, all over the place on one very busy slide.
So I'll just give a different point of view here. This just for fun. Why do we care about other operators' efficiencies? Why? I just want to be 10% better than I was yesterday. If I can be 10% better as an operator than I was yesterday, that's massive at the scale we run. Yeah. And all operators have a completely different reality. They have a different topology. They have a different leasing structure. They have a different regulation even. So I think it's irrelevant again. I don't think operators should see themselves as being the same businesses. We're each a different business. We should each have our own customer promise, and we should each have our own metrics that actually we just need to get better at delivering. Now, to your point, Ian, it does surprise me that people aren't sharing. I agree. I would imagine with Stéphane's comment, if you suddenly turn around to me and said, give me data, I don't want to make mistakes in the data. When TELUS has presented, they've presented results that are even more gung-ho than Rakuten Mobile and Rakuten Symphony. And they have no problems showing how they have both beaten the performance of traditional supply and also the business KPIs, either CapEx, OpEx, or whatever it is.
There are some numbers then, you're saying, both of you are saying.
Oh, there are absolutely numbers. TELUS, I think TELUS has been tremendously vocal in highlighting what's possible in a brownfield as well. That's the power of that.
Well, the reason why, I mentioned it because putting my other hat on, my sort of day job hat, as you know, I'm involved with helping companies which are growing supply chain into the telco industry. And it always comes back to what's the business case, right? And at the end of the day, numbers matter. And that's what I'm actually talking to. How do I convert this network, Goliath? And the challenge you have when you're in sales and you're talking to the engineers, well, it's not their day job to build business cases. So again, it's to do with more, as you say, I'm not actually thinking, Geoff, as you say, I think perfectly correct, each operator's unique and that's good. But some sort of toolkit or some sort of way of looking at it to even sort of look at the angles, as Stéphane said, energy saving could be one, it could be user experience. But some of these people who understand engineering KPIs are not very good at translating that into business value. And therefore, that would be a useful, I don't know, even a workshop or something at these events. How does one translate? Because I always see in my day job, you talk to the engineers, you convince them. But as I say, you can imagine, and I'm sure you're all aware of the business people and the technical people really live in, particularly big operators, they don't really understand each other that well.
In 2023, we wrote a white paper that was the blueprint of what Rakuten had done with Rakuten Symphony had done with Rakuten Mobile. And we called it Mobile as a Software. And it went through every single layer from site development through physical hardware, through softwareizing the radio layer, through automating it, through collecting the data. And we explained the approaches we'd taken at each layer from a Rakuten Mobile point of view on how to optimize costs. And it's really simple things. So if you are running everything on 3 SKUs of hardware, either a data center hardware, a high performance hardware, and a mid performance hardware, then what happens is that you end up not having bespoke operational teams looking after different supply chains for different hardware components at the application level. You're not keeping inventory. You're not managing returns separately. That's where you start to take, it's not rocket science savings, this. It's the industrialization of how you run your company and your business. Now, we wrote that, and we were invited by GSMA to present it to the strategy team. They hold a strategy where all the chief strategy officers come around from about 120 operators. And we had a really good conversation. The challenge that existing operators have, I think, is that their installed footprint is highly concentrated in an installed supply chain, an incumbent supply chain, where they're dealing with different issues. Some of those cost savings aren't available, and it's not in the interests of their existing supply chain to suddenly change how they're working. They can't afford to do that either. So I think we do have that, but I think the dynamics of who owns the actual cost structure of supply needs to move from the supply side back into the operator, and they need to own system design, not the vendors.
Very good point about the operators also taking it.
I'm quite passionate about this. I've been trying to say it for 3 years.
I would like to go on to one particular topic, and Stéphane sort of pointed towards the NG&M session, which I actually really enjoyed as well, which was where you say the CTO of Bernard was there, and Laurent was there from Orange, and who's the other one from Telefonica?
Gaetano.
So they were all there trying to, as I say, sort of give a view on things. But the session was about 6G, and that was what it's supposed to be about. So I guess, you know, this whole project, going back to the actual project, not the event, is about how do we deliver practical solutions. So where's TIP and FYUZ's view related to 6G? And is it a software upgrade or is it a hardware upgrade?
I presume that's to me.
I don't know. I see who's still sitting on their chair at this point. Well, you can take it for starters. I'm sure others will want to comment.
Yeah, let me give some sort of hypotheses or starting points. TIP doesn't have a 6G project group. I mean, we don't need a project group around that. Everything that we're doing hopefully leads to an inevitable sort of outcome, which is 6G friendly. I think the points that I've picked up on are a few. One is this is evolution, not revolution. So we need to be thinking this as short innovation cycles. And that's only come about because of the fact that we're starting to, one, understand what is the current traffic loads that we have, where is that traffic coming from, and how do we manage it better through to what could come in the future. So the future could hold more devices and different experiences that are, you know, some might be physical AI, some might be sort of agentic functions on devices, etc. Then if you're taking that view, then of course, downlink, uplink sort of pressure increases. Maybe there's an even more need for sort of generation of management of inter-data center traffic as well. So east-west increase as well. But it's all dependent upon actually telecom operators evolving with either their incumbent vendors or new vendor ecosystems, starting to really think about, to Geoff's point, getting towards that ideology and ethos of programmability and real automation driven in their networks and their operations, releasing cost out of their customer operations, sales ops, network ops, really looking, ensuring that they've got automation built into their transport and transmission networks so that they can manage the capacity between on compute and the inferencing pressures, looking at whether they want to put GPU or CPU infrastructure into their edge, for what purpose? What's the business case of that? Which enterprises are going to use it? Are truly going to be using that? What are the use cases on there? So there's no real clear sort of pathway, but there are different approaches. And I think, if anything, there's got to be some sort of view that you're getting towards some level of centralized models or platforms, model training, digital twin simulations. You thinking of edge inference as long as you understand what the applications are and the use cases of that, but much better orchestration and really embedding AI into this so that you've got a very clear way as a telco on how do you manage your network topology. And this is market construct, right? This is within your network, within your market, within your regulatory construct. It's not a group decision. It's a netco decision. And of course, if there is an opportunity to start to really create some federated learning, like Stéphane was saying, maybe these network language models can start to really be created, and vendors and operators start to leverage their network data better, then you are able to really develop a network that is truly programmable, that is autonomous, that is really looking at harnessing its capabilities, exposing it through APIs. This is just a mindset of lots of hypothetical thinking that is coming from demand supply. But from a tip perspective, I'm hoping what we're doing right now is the beginnings of that, and what may manifest is something that is much more concrete around what does that truly look like in a 6G world. And that will take probably a couple of years.
Okay. Anyone to add to that? Stéphane, do you want to add to that? Or?
So it looks like, Ian, you also attended that session, and remember the common belief that there'll be, a 6G standard, to Geoff's point. And basically, I raised the red flag by mentioning that, it doesn't sound like this is the way we are going, because you have China developing its own flavor. And the world has become so fragmented right now that I just don't see any 6G standard. And I have lots of ammunitions actually to defend that statement because of what's happening at 3GPP as we speak. Lots of disagreements already, about for example, having Open RAN as the foundation of 6G. Another discussion is, will there be a 6G core? I don't think so. You don't need to. And when you look at the numbers of 5G SA right now in the world, we are not moving into that direction of having a 6G core. But, the NGMN is apparently convinced that there'll be, a 6G standard. And we all know the benefits of a global, common standard, economies of scales and scope. But when you have to deal with a country like China with more than 1 billion people and, retrenching onto itself because of geopolitical conflicts, do they care about the rest of the world? You have your own market. You can do a lot of good things, in your own market with more than 1 billion people. Look at India. This is another one with more than 1 billion people. So you have two big markets, because India actually is already making some interesting moves of using its own technology. For operators, and I mentioned that actually during the session, for operators, two already have ditched foreign vendors. Okay. So, as a result, I don't see, the evolution, toward a 6G standard, picking up some steam. It's the opposite.
Geoff, anything you wanted to add to that, or should I move on?
I just very quickly, our discussion here, geopolitics, from what Stéphane said, is going to change the landscape. It's already changed the landscape. We're in the biggest technology revolution since the internet turned up with AI. We've got NTN, we've got satellite, we've got different neutral hosts, different traffic patterns. Anybody who thinks this world is going to look the same in 5 years' time is going to find that they've bet on a future that has got disrupted. And this isn't going to be friendly. This is going to be absolute attrition and destruction by people who can move faster than you. If you can't move fast. So I think this is an existential situation for our industry to now change how we approach our industry. Otherwise, we'll see people from outside our industry doing some very, very kind of disruptive things to us. MVNOs are going to turn up. eSIM's going to take away the relationship. Amazon launches a service, and or rumors of Amazon launching a service, and all the carriers' stock prices go down 10%. No moat to it. It's the most exciting time to be in our industry since the 90s. It's all bets are off. So all you can do is get really good at what you do.
So on that one, I think I heard in an event recently, is it 600 billion is what the big four providers of AI are investing, which is more than the capital investment of the telcos by 2 or something like that.
Oh, yes, $600 billion, 4 companies exchanging money. It's twice as much as global capex, which are pretty much at $300 billion, global telecom capex, and actually going down. And we don't see any uptick all the way to 2030 because 6G, as opposed to the previous Gs, are not generating, any capital investment excitement. So this is an interesting fact.
One thing I wanted to point out on the 6G, which I picked up at this summit and have picked up at a few places, one area that does excite me potentially is the area of sensing. So both on fixed line, there was a session at the event, FYUZ, around sensing, which also I understand the idea of radio propagation and sensing and Wi-Fi. I've seen that as well. But I didn't realize that actually the fibers also can be used that way. So for seismic shifts and whatever, they're able to use it, and for potential disaster situations as well. So I thought that was quite interesting. So I think whether it's going to be called, by the way, I'm actually a proponent of we shouldn't call it 6G. We should have stuck with LTE, long time evolution. It's just a long time and it's evolving. I mean, why do we have to complicate it beyond that? And I also come back to anyone who argues, let's do 6G. In today's world, and you talk about fragmentation, and you talked about different things moving at different paces, right? So do I need a core? Do I need a RAN? All these different things. At what point is it 6G and when is it not? So I think we are getting ourselves in a bit of a muddle there as industry. But we are coming to the end now. So just really, each of you, have you got any particular last point you want to make, which could either be, again, another thing which was great, or something missing, or some prediction for the future? And then we can wrap up. Vish, do you want to...
Put me on the spot. I had a sort of a glib comment coming out in my head, which is we're all sort of a generation that may not be in this industry in the next 10, 15 years. So it felt like it was a conference for the over 50s, AI for 50-year-olds plus. So I think my intent for that message is, yes, there is great core engineering principles that need to be applied here. Yes, there is sort of an avenue and a pathway that the industry wants to follow that seems to be a great sort of shining light. What we need to do is ensure the telco industry is attractive and appealing to the new generation. And I think it can be if we broadcast it as an industry that is growing, that is sectorally changing, in terms of the way it sees networks being provisioned in the future. And bringing in technologies like AI and agentic AI and framing of that actually does attract new people. So one of the things that I loved at FYUZ this year was the hackathon that was run on the weekend before, which attracted in a population, 300 plus people, students, startups coming in and playing with not network functions, but a nice wrap around network functions exposed through APIs and simulators and data and stuff like that, and creating new apps. Want to see more of that in FYUZ 26. That's my comment.
Appledore did a podcast released today, actually, which is worth listening to, where they talked to the people that did that hackathon, and that was quite interesting. Also, the mashup of someone who's from an IT background and knows AI, and the other guy with telco experience, and how they think they've got quite far down the road of building things. But I think the risk of AI, just briefly on that, I generally see is, I think you can get with AI 80% of the way really quite well and quickly. But when you then want to sort of finalize it, make it product bulletproof or whatever, that's where the problems arise. So certainly for demos and other things, it's good. Stéphane, any sort of closing thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I mean, let's get ready for FYUZ 2026. I guess we'll hear more about AI run, which is not new, as I said, and partially, causing some confusion between the ORAN Alliance and the AI Run Alliance, because at the end of the day, AI for RAN is what SON is. So there is nothing new at the AI Run Alliance. And as Rob Sony put it nicely, this is the beginning of Open RAN 2.0, meaning that without Open RAN, there is no AI Run. And in fact, we have a nice chart showing that evolution, and we'll hear more about this, because this is how the event was kind of closing, on that note. So more to come next year on that front.
Thank you very much. And Geoff, are you going again? You were there this year. Will you go again?
Oh, I think we'll be there next year. I hope we're there next year, Vishal.
Please.
It's the most frightening time to be in telecom. It's the most exciting time to be in telecom. It just depends on how you want to see it. If you don't define your own future as an individual, as a company, be it a supplier or a vendor, somebody else will define it for you. So, and it's not going to get it's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder. So I'm quite excited by that, but it comes down to who you are, where you sit, and what your personality is like.
Perfect. Well, I've really enjoyed this discussion. One thing back to you, Vish. I think one of the questions was, where is FYUZ going to be next year? I think that was one of the open questions, or have I misunderstood it?
I've heard Venezuela, Vishal. Is that true?
They've got plenty of oil there, haven't they? That will help feed the masses. We will tell you very shortly. Believe me, it will come out in the next couple of weeks.
Well, Venezuela is a hot tip here. Anyone who's listening to this podcast,
it's not Venezuela. Given this is recorded, but it will be around the first week of November. That's for sure. We found a place, we found a location, and we found a date range.
Could I ask a continent at least?
A continent.
A continent.
Yes, North America.
Okay. All right. There you go. So Venezuela it is.
Can I ask a state?
Right. Anyway, well, it's okay. So it's going to be North America, and we will work around that. Again, you're now part of Digital Talk family, and really pleased to have you on board. And maybe there'll be other podcasts in the future. And it's been, for me, an interesting discussion. I now have a better understanding of the purpose of both TIP and the FYUZ event, having been there. I do enjoy being there with the community, but I haven't quite understood that. Certainly the evening drinks are great, as well as going down the ferryman as well, as lots of people do. But this is the thing. This is Vishal. You have to work out. It has to be a place where you have the same vibe in the evening as you do as Dublin. So if you can achieve that in the US, then I think we'll all be happy.
That's part of it. Don't worry, we get it.
So thank you, gentlemen, Stéphane, Vishal, and Geoff, for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate us and subscribe, and feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. And if you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please send us an email. Thanks for being part of the Digitel Talk community and for listening. Stay tuned.